Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where we are taking a look at every single Best Picture winner in complete random order. That's the whole gist of it. And this week, boy oh boy, we have got a film to talk about. It's Mutiny on the Bounty from 1935, quite a ways back in the past, directed by Frank Lloyd, starring Clark Gable, probably on there, Charles Laughton, and a couple of other people. Pretty interesting film about boats. We'll see. It takes place mostly on a boat. We're going to get into it though, but before we do, a little bit of housekeeping from last time. I know we took a little bit of a break, but we're back better than ever. We talked about Chariots of Fire from 1981. It ended up at 35th place on our list, our ever-growing list of 42 films, and it had an average score of what we decided was a 5.4 through our highly advanced, highly statistical averaging system of our ranks. So there we go. I'm pretty excited to talk about this film, but before we get into it, we got our highlighted comment from last time. And so Tanner, why don't you sock it to me? Who's got what to say?
We always appreciate, a nice informed comment. We get some from classic guys like John Tor and Dan Eberhardt, but we have to specifically feature Phil Wood this week, our presumably one and only British viewer, who says, BLB certainly doesn't stand for British loving boys, does it? You have gone and done... went hating on us again. And I say, Phil, try making a good movie next time.
Yeah. It's all his fault.
As the representative for all British people, you try making a better movie next time. No, we love you, Phil. We love all of our Quest viewers. And leave a comment on this video if you want to be featured next time.
Yeah, exactly. And hit that like and subscribe and download button on whatever platform you're doing. Yeah, you're going to be down there anyway. So, Mutiny on the Bounty doesn't exactly inspire a whole lot of confidence in British people either, actually, as it happens. So, initial thoughts. Who wants to get it started? Tucker, maybe?
Sure, why not? Because I think this is a phenomenal film. I mean, it's easily amazing in most categories, I think, and I was just blown away by how much I enjoyed this for the vast majority of its runtime. I had a few issues when it comes to the overall pacing and structure and things like that, but from most perspectives, I thought this was a hell of a lot of fun and way better than I thought it was going to be.
There you go. Abram?
Yeah, I agree. I think this movie is great. I had no expectations for it. To be totally transparent, I had to do a bunch of really monotonous Japanese homework. So I was making flashcards for like the first 20 minutes of the movie. So I'm like, there's no way I'm going to enjoy this movie, right? Mm-hmm. But very quickly, I think I got wrapped up in how amazing the scale of this movie is and how inventive it is in terms of the way it's shot and all the energy and the chaos. I think it's fairly flawed. I think it has issues with character, and I think that the pace does, it takes some weird turns that I think this probably could have been a 90, 100-minute film, and it probably could have been stronger. But I was genuinely surprised by how much I enjoyed this.
There you go. Tanner?
I'm in the same boat as Tucker and Abram,
The Bounty.
Yeah, the Bounty, or maybe the Pandora, if you will. But
I don't know if you want to get on that one.
No, probably not. But I was sort of, this is a surprise hit all the way back, almost 100 years ago, that I was really engaged in. Tucker and I, we were sitting, they were on the edge of our seats. We're like, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna happen next to our classic guys, Clark Gable, Charles Laughton? I think the cast knocks out of the park here. I think the scale, like Abram said, is phenomenal. And I do have some of the similar issues that Tucker and Abram said about the pacing, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But yeah, surprise hit all the way back from 1935.
Really, I'm just going to sound like a little pirate's parrot here because I agree with all of these points pretty much exactly. Surprise, I didn't really have any expectations. I went into it and this film just like starts and you're in. It has like zero exposition before the plot like really begins, which is fun, especially for older movies. You expect long, drawn out. We got to set up all these characters, but no, we're in, and we're having seafaring adventures, which is really fun. I was really surprised at how good this movie looks. I do not know how they did the majority of these shots. Did they buy a ship? Did they just like film out in the middle of the ocean for weeks on end? Because the visual effects in this film were one of the most spectacular elements in my mind. And we think about why did this film win Best Picture? And to me, that jumped out immediately as its first point. 1935, we have barely even invented rear projection in terms of visual effects, and yet this movie totally sells that we're on the high seas, and yet we couldn't have been on the high seas while we were filming it. I don't know. The filmmaker in me really wants to learn how they did it because it's that impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you get sucked in right away, and I think the first thing for me that showed me that this is going to be something a little more than I initially expected. I expected sort of just a long, drawn-out drama on the high seas, whatever, people arguing, which is, what you get, but this movie is a lot funnier than I thought it was going to be. And right from those first few scenes, you get surprisingly funny dialogue that is just chock full of sailor slang, which is so much fun to piece together and listen to them bantering back and forth with all these funny words. And that's what pulled me in right away. And then you get introduced to the characters in that way. And as soon as you hit the boats, it's scale, it's spectacle, it's people climbing every which direction they possibly can, deep background shots of people on other boats way in the background. And I'm like, this is 30 years before Lawrence of Arabia and Ben-Hur, which are both movies very much known for their scale and scope and depth. But this almost matches that 30 years before, and that's just ridiculously impressive.
I remember when we rolled this film, we were like, will the boats match up to that Ben-Hur scene? And while I think that the sheer spectacle of Ben-Hur and the color really adds a lot to it, this thing has a runtime. It keeps it up. It's not one scene of boats, it's the whole movie. The whole movie takes place in and around these ships, which just could not have been easy to do. That just oh my God, a production nightmare. But it turned out it worked. They put in the effort and it shows. So I do a quick add here. I do kind of agree about some of these issues later in the film. We'll get into it, I think. But let's start by going around about the characters. What did what are your opinions on our two leading men here, and then our subsequent large cast of side characters?
Yeah. So if I can hop in here, let's just get my biggest issue of the movie out of the way. I don't think the characters are very good.
Oh. Wow.
I think that they fill niches in an interesting story, but I'm not sure that they're set up in an especially compelling way. I think they feel very predictable. I think you kind of can understand pretty quickly, oh, the captain's kind of a jackass, right? And it's telegraphed early on, but I just don't think that the characters, the way that they're written, doesn't give me a lot to grab onto. Okay, you've got a family. You fell in love on Tahiti. You are tired of the captain's nonsense. Right, and that's all good, and I think it's elevated by really excellent performances. I think the performances are what bring these characters to life, not the writing. And for me, I found that a little bit disappointing when they all kind of look the same. They all kind of sound the same. Roger and Fletcher are the only exceptions to that, and they come into their own a little bit. But even then, I think that it is the scope and it is the plot and the larger strokes of Mutiny on the Bounty that work for me, not necessarily any of the characters inherently.
See, now that's interesting because I actually was surprised at the nuance that I especially found in Christian Clark Gable and Bligh, Charles Laughton, because starting off with Clark Gable, Christian, it was really interesting after that mutiny took place, and there is that sense of lawlessness. There's a power vacuum, essentially, is what's going on there. And he has to sort of, crack the whip a little bit and be like, no, we can't just, kill all these people. We have to, there's a certain sense of honor that we must endure and, send them out on their way. And in that same vein, following directly after that, I think the nuance of Captain Bligh is captured when he's on that small life raft with the 30 other guys or whatever it is. And you come to realize that he is a good sailor. He's a good seaman, if you will. But he's just not a good captain. He's not a good leader. He's an asshole. He's a jackass, like Abram said. And for that reason, that is what causes the conflict. But that is not to detract in any way from his sailing abilities.
Yeah, I found that part interesting because I felt like the film definitely built up Bligh as this character that we're very explicitly supposed to hate. We do not. We are in no way supposed to find any good parts in him whatsoever. And yet here at the end of the film, in the last third or so, it's kind of like giving us a little crumb of like, oh, maybe we shouldn't totally dislike this guy, which I thought was an interesting choice. They didn't play into it as much for me to like go around. You know, he still treated the dudes on the boat like trash. You know, he was still a jackass.
No, I disagree.
But they survived.
On
survived.
the lifeboat?
Yeah, on the lifeboat. They survived,
See,
and so there's a certain element in my mind where it's like, well, maybe in that case he was justified. But in every other case, you know, I hated him.
Abram, what were you going to say?
Well, to that point right there, I do agree that if you want to talk about finding any nuance, I would agree that the boat sequence is good. Like when they catch the seagull and the old man says, like, give it to the younger guys, and there's kind of like this playfulness and Bly where he's like, I still make the orders around here. You're going to drink this because I'm going to keep you alive. But I think the reason that these moments feel like the exceptions to the rule for me is that I think we get telegraphed pretty early on that, okay, Fletcher, he is the moral man. You see very early on, okay, the first transgression, the first whipping, right? Okay, he's not going to stand for this. And then you just find yourself waiting for his beats to happen. Again, this is why I think the acting elevates the script a lot, because there are good moments here, but I just don't think that any individual character carries a lot. I'm reminded, God, I hate to make a film school reference here, but you think about your Battleship Potemkins or something, the idea of the collective protagonist. And for me, I think that's what succeeds here. And you do have those tensions between, but ultimately, we're supposed to identify with the guy who has the kid and the wife back home, but that's kind of surface level. That's my issue. I don't think that the characters are as memorable as what surrounds them. And for me, they felt like pieces enabling the really exciting narrative that unfolds across the film.
Sure.
I think for me, the reason that the relative simplicity of those characters isn't actually a huge hindrance for the film is because they do serve as cogs in this larger narrative that I think is really thematically interesting, told in a really interesting way, progresses in a really interesting way that's pretty surprisingly slow, all things considered, even though every specific sequence is very fast-paced and chaotic. It takes a long time to really build to that mutiny that you know is happening because of the title. But each of those characters fill their roles for that, and seeing Bly, be obviously the villain character for a huge amount of the movie, and then realizing that when you cut to him on the boat with the other guys, is that he can lead them. He does have those skills. He does have another side that he can retract into that is pushing his leadership skills in a stronger way, but he also has people who still are loyal to him regardless of him being mean to them. Like, there's a lot of nuance here in terms of the theme of leadership styles and how all of that layers on top of one another, which I think is brought even to a more interesting head. Of course, you get the mutiny and you get them separating their separate ways, and then you have Bly going after Fletcher for a long time, and you have Fletcher leaving without really or taking the ship and having everyone leave without really consulting them. Like, all of their leadership styles and goals and things of that nature are so woven into the overarching plot that the fact that they're pretty one note in terms of their personalities is not that big of a deal to me.
I guess. Oh, Abram, you can go ahead.
I agree in part with you, but I think I have issues with the idea that the film is that thematically interesting, I suppose. Because I essentially find the ending to be fairly unsatisfactory in the way that unfolds, and I find myself wanting a little bit more out of Roger, out of Bly, out of the way that the military court rules on them, right? I think part of my issue with the characters feeling flat is because I think that the themes don't really get followed through on. And Tucker, you say things like, okay, we're going to leave with a sequence of them leaving Tahiti with Fletcher to go out to finding the next island, right? Mm-hmm. There's really not a whole lot of tension there, right? We see the one scene where the girls are like dancing and the guy goes to kiss her, and then there's like the scuffle, right? But ultimately, I don't think that tells you a whole lot. I think that we get a very rosy, kind of rugged Fletcher ending, and then we get what I found to be a kind of muddled ending for everybody else. In the last scene where we see Roger get on board the ship again, for me, I wasn't quite sure how I was supposed to take that. I think for me, it speaks to perhaps not the strongest script in the world. I really do think that the script is carried in large part by performance and by set design and set pieces. So I don't know how I feel about the thematic elements of the movie.
I will say my personal enjoyment of these characters comes from the understanding. I pretty much know where the film is going from the moment it opens. I know we're going to build up. We're going to get more examples of the captain being horrible and mistreating the crew. And then eventually it's going to break. There's going to be a breaking point. And so just the way that the characters interact in those individual moments is what drives the interest for me throughout the first 2/3 of the film until we get to the mutiny. And then to not make a film school reference, but a film bro reference, it's kind of like in the Wes Anderson movie, the Darjeeling Limited. They go off the train. When you're done with the mutiny and the film continues on for another half hour after the mutiny is done, I feel like we lose our way because we're less concerned with this very tight narrative, I think, of, how do we get to the mutiny? Basically is what's going on. But then once the mutiny is done, we have all these ends that we're trying to wrap up, and it takes a long time. And so that's where I feel the film is a little bit more misguided in its execution and in its ending, probably, if it were to just stick with this mutiny story. But I liked the way that I was confused kind of at the end. I kind of agree with Roger's character. Like, he gets on the boat, but he was a convicted mutineer and he wasn't supposed to be. He's like still on death row. Like, he's gonna get killed someday, maybe. I don't really know how he gets resolved, but or any of the other characters in that court for that matter. We're not really shown.
Yeah. I want to talk about the thing that you brought up, Abram, about the thematic, the thematics of this film. And I think you have a good point about the follow through, maybe. But I think there's a lot of understated stuff that comes across very well. And this can be a difference of opinion, because I know that we had a similar disagreement on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You made a film school reference. Timo made a film bro reference. I'm bringing it meta around. I'm making a Quest reference. Because I think Bly
school bro reference.
Bly represents the same sort of, orderly, overseeing Big Brother sort of government, regimented force that Nurse Ratched represents in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I know when we talked about that film, you had some issues about that being a bit simplistic in that nature. But yeah, in a lot of ways, if you think about it, this film really is similar to that. It's at its core, it's about freedom and self-respect. And there's a point in the film in which your Jack Nicholson or your Clark Gable leads a mutiny against the regimented system led by Bly or Nurse Ratched. But yeah, I think that whole Bly's role as that regimented system is really great, and I think the follow-through thing there does carry a bit of water, like a boat, because
drinking water.
The mutiny scene is somewhat, problematic, for lack of a better term, in my mind, because Tucker and I were talking about this. So we see the scene where Bly sort of forces Dr. Bacchus to come up from the brig. He's very sick. He's on the verge of death. He forces him to come up, and Bacchus arrives. He's put on his uniform, and he drops dead right in front of the entire crew. And that's a great moment, because you see there's a great musical sting right there. The entire crew is staring at him. They have they have this look on their face. Clark Gable has a great look on his face. Even Charles Lawton, Captain Bly, you see a look of realization come across his face that's like, oh shit, I just messed up. I killed our surgeon. And that's where I thought the mutiny was going to happen, that moment right there. But it was really only the final straw. It wasn't even the final straw, actually. That's where the mutiny should have happened. Instead of this C-tier character being beaten up in the brig by another C-tier character, and that's where Clark Gable draws the line. That is a bit of an issue for me, just because I think that initial scene of Bacchus dying is so well executed that it would have been a lot more impactful as the mutiny scene.
I think there's a couple. I agree with you. And the powerful, I think they might have written themselves into a corner logistically. They needed to have some certain people be in certain places and have access to the muskets. And there's a lot of like emotional, like story beat reasons why they had to do it there. I agree with you. That would have been, I mean, that would have made the mutiny scene, I think, far more impactful, because probably my like least favorite part of the film, the part that I was looking forward to the most. Boy, I was like, oh man, I cannot wait for this mutiny to happen. I am so ready. I really want to watch. I really want to watch the captain get what's coming to him. I am so ready for this. And then when it happens, it's like kind of really unsatisfying in my mind. It happens. It's a sort of action scene. It's probably not the best action scene in the film. And it just is like, blah, 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 mutiny. Okay, it's done. And then I'm like, oh wait, what? I was looking forward to this, and so I was kind of disappointed, and maybe that's coming from it being placed strangely, and the impetus for the whole thing not exactly happening where I wanted it to.
For me, I think I disagree on that point, and it kind of goes to what Tanner was saying about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? In that film, and to kind of continue a parallel forward, you have the individual, and then you have the big apparatus, whatever it is. And so my problem with carrying that here is I don't think we have the individual particularly well defined, right? Because in Cuckoo's Nest, you had an ensemble cast of all very recognizable individuals. And here you don't really. What you have essentially is people subservient to the crown. And I think what made this the death of the surgeon powerful for me in the absence of the mutiny was the fact that these people are not individuals. They are a collective that is subservient to this larger idea, and not even this egregious death is going to shake that. And that kind of, for me, underscores where I find the tones to kind of fizzle out, because I think you could have had more interesting discussion on the extent to which people were or were not loyal to that government. It ends up feeling a bit black and white with various characters, or like when Fletcher's pearls get confiscated and he's like, "This is for the crown," and the subtext being "not for you." I feel like those themes didn't quite get explored, and I think that the death of the surgeon was a nice opportunity to subtly do that. But I found the mutiny sequence to still be pretty compelling, right? Because I didn't want it to be overwrought, and I don't think it is. I think it's very quick, and I think there's a real energy there in the chaos of who's who, why are we all fighting, what's going on, right? I think that was actually conveyed pretty well, so I wouldn't have changed a lot about it.
I think the reason for me, also, I agree. I think the mutiny scene is great, and I think that the reason it works so well for me is because of how fantastic all the filmmaking elements work together in this movie. I mean, every aspect of the filmmaking is working together to create a really energetic and exciting film that carries its spectacle across the entire runtime. There are a few moments where it drags, but I think even then that's just sort of to release some tension so it can ramp back up. And I'm just recalling that first sequence where they're loading up the boat, and just this fast-paced editing and the music building, people climbing up ropes and shots of people's faces, and I just thought that was absolutely fantastic, and that was the energy that really roped me into the movie, pun intended. It was carried throughout, and especially because I think that mutiny scene is well done, and then you kind of are able to, with the fact that doesn't end the movie. It's kind of almost the halfway mark, a little bit after, you get to see a lot of the aftermath of that. What did it cost? They had to send off all these people. Now there's not really a structure. Bly has to take care of his men now. They have to get used to Fletcher being the captain. Fletcher has to step into those shoes. The mutiny is really just the onus to flesh out these characters even more, which is where I find that thematic value. But all of that is just driven by the incredible filmmaking fundamentals that are at work here.
Yeah, I think the cinematography in this film is great. There's not one shot that looks bad in my mind, or reminds me of American in Paris, when another Quest reference, when we got those matte screen, blue screen shots of them in the car that just look awful. I mean, they're just like, the VFX is just not good. And this film had to have a lot of, I'm gonna keep bringing it up because it is truly awe-inspiring to me, but like, those people climbing on those ropes, those guys were. They really were climbing on those ropes, and that was, I don't think that was a model ship. That was a real ship. They were really out there. There are big wide shots of this thing in high seas, and the only way I could really think of them doing it and having it look that good is to have a big ship out in the water and the seas are rolling, and to me that just is like, I love to see that kind of stuff. I love it.
Yeah.
it's really controlled, and I think that's so cool. There is a lot of chaos, and also even the quiet shots I really like there's this one wide shot where they're sitting at a table, but like the bottom of the frame is kind of off, like the floor of the boat is like at an angle to the bottom of the frame because they're trying to convey that we're rolling. They're just really small details, not even set dressing, really small production, actual filmmaking details here that are so clever and feel really inventive even today. I really think that the movie is just so fun to watch, and I think that the practical element gives it a real sense of tension that I find missing from a lot of films. So I was constantly riveted by this movie, and that's not something that's able to happen a whole ton. I will say, in a film that is really technically excellent, I think there's a lot of shots that weirdly cut like at the last line of dialogue off. And I did not understand why that kept happening because it didn't feel stylistic at a certain point. It just felt very strange.
At the end of the scene you're talking about when they would fade out and we'd fade into the next and they would be talking and like the last line would not be done when we'd be totally black. Yeah, interesting choice. Yeah. Don't really know what's going on there.
That's something that I've noticed a lot as I've watched more old movies, is that's just something that Hollywood movies did back in the day. And I'm like, why? Give your scene a little bit of more room to breathe after they finish the line. You do not need to fade to black right as they're finishing the line.
It's like 4 frames. It's so infinitesimal.
It's ridiculous. But for me, the reason that doesn't really bother me is because I've recognized over the years how I watch more old movies that this is just something they did. And it's frustrating, and it used to piss me off a lot more than it does now. But I think also the reason that doesn't frustrate me too much is because this movie has so much to go over. And I think that is both a strength and a weakness of it, is some of the sections feel like they're padding on or not padding, but it's still going. We have another scene. But even though it does feel like that on the large scale, in each sequence, I think they're all really interesting. And it does keep going and keep adding more layers to this story. It's not just on the boat, it's the off the boat and then back on the boat, and then the boats split, and then you have the guys in the courtroom and you have them surviving on the island and stuff. There's so many layers to this story that in those tiny moments, maybe there's a little bit of weird editing choices, but it manages to balance so much in the large scale that it doesn't even really bother me in the end.
I mean, we really haven't touched on the scenes in Tahiti, which I think is a pretty good choice to have that happen before the mutiny. I mean, I don't know how it would happen after the mutiny, but it's a scene change, it's a scenery change, it's a nice refresher. There's new characters, we're getting new relationships are being built, and I found those scenes to be fun and interesting in a very different way. There's a lot less tension. It's almost like the film style and the film pacing is now in an island paradise, as the setting is in an island paradise.
Taking a vacation in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, you take a little vacation and then you're back in it. And you're back in the tension on the high seas, and it works.
Thank you for bringing up the Tahitians and the parts in Tahiti, because I'm no expert on native cultures and stuff like that, but I'm fairly certain they would have had a concept of currency, because all things considered, and Tucker and I said this, from our perspective, this seems like a not overtly racist portrayal of native people, which is really kind of impressive for 1935. If I don't say so myself. I was waiting for I was waiting for brown face. I was waiting for terrible stereotyping, but it never really happened. I mean, if you look into it, maybe not all of those actors were actually, Polynesian or actually Tahitian or something like that. But other than that, I thought that it was treated with a decent amount of respect.
There's an interesting subplot about the language that happens there on the island.
Yeah.
And while I have absolutely no clue how accurate any of that is, that it is included and that's like a point, it's interesting. Yeah.
It's a respectful way to include the exploration of clashing of cultures, which is why I think that Tahiti section is really interesting to me. While it is slower, and maybe it does go on a little bit too long, I think it certainly could have been cut down. I really like how respectful it is to the idea of these cultures coming together and them having to figure out how they communicate, and they are doing business with one another and they are showing each other how their cultures work. And I thought it was a really fun respite from the tension of the rest of it, which is why, even though it could have been cut down, I'm very glad they had it in there. It could have easily been a write-off section where, okay, well, this is just not related to the plot, but I think it gives you a chance for the for you to breathe from the tension, for the characters to breathe from the tension, and to have some development away from that tension where you get Christian Fletcher, trying to go get off and have some fun and rebelling a little bit against Bly more directly, and building those relationships with the love interests, which are on the whole pretty weak, but I think it does develop both Byam and Fletcher's characters a little bit better in terms of them exploring the world a little bit more in a direct sense. But I really, really did enjoy the Tahiti section, especially looking back on it.
I was just going to say that it's a studio system film. Got to have a little romance. Can't have romance in a production code era film with sailors together on a boat. And so it's a predictable thing, but it's like, okay, another example of like this is an artifact of the time. And whatever. I liked it too.
I liked it though.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. I was a Tahiti hater when we went the first time because it felt like an unnecessary digression. But when we returned to Tahiti, I think this is, again, speaking to the exceptions to the rule of my issue with the characterization here, I think we do get some really nice moments. And we get a little bit more meat on the bone for some of these characters. Is his name Ellis, the young guy who had the wife and the child? Mm-hmm. The scene where he sees Fletcher's baby... and it's like, oh my god, like the sort of recognition of like my kid is getting older, right, and I'm not there for it, right, and being willing to hang to see his family one more time. I think that the fact that we're slowing down a little bit and taking more time for the characters opposed to just, oh my god, it's so cool that they made this ship and I just want to see the ship and I want to see them do things on the ship, right? I think it's important to the film, and I do agree that it probably could have taken. Maybe one of the beach dates could have been gone or something, right? We didn't need to frolic quite as much as we did, but I do think it was important to the film.
Yeah. Timo, funny that you just off the cuff brought up how maybe a production code wouldn't have allowed for two sailors to have a relationship because Bly, Charles Lawton, you couldn't exactly be out in 1935, but it was sort of an open secret. This is my first and most interesting bit of trivia. I've been lacking on the trivia this episode. I'm so very sorry, but I think he was producer Irvin Thalberg cast Clark Gable and Charles Lawton together in hope that they would have conflict, because apparently Clark Gable was pretty outwardly homophobic and Charles Lawton was sort of like an open secret that he was gay. And there was some butting of heads on set ideologically. Apparently, Lawton brought his quite burly and muscular boyfriend to filming one day, and he would have massages openly, and Clark Gable was apparently not very happy that they were doing that just out in the open. So Clark Gable,
Thanks, Clark.
Get off your high horse, Clark Gable. Pull that stick out of your ass. How about?
That's funny. That's great trivia,
yeah.
Tanner. The lack of trivia is forgiven.
That's okay.
And I mean, regardless of the homophobia of the time, and of course, Clark Gable, don't be homophobic. I hope he hears this. But I think it is interesting that the casting even went to that degree to get conflict out of those characters, because you do feel a lot of tension between Bly and Christian, and their way they bounce off each other and the tension in each of their conversations shines through. And unfortunately, it was in part inspired by their real life tension, but it does get the performance and interaction out of the characters. So, while I will shit on Clark Gable for being homophobic, I in some way appreciate that it brought out even more tension in the film.
He also had to shave his stupid little mustache for this film. So fuck you, Clark Gable.
He looks good without it. Let's be real.
Just a weird quirk of filmmaking in that it's like, is that manipulative? Is that like a good creative decision or a bad one? Like, I don't, because it works, but like, was that the right? Who knows? I don't really want to wade into that. That is an interesting aside there, but
very one of the most bizarre pieces of trivia you've ever brought to this show.
Well, hey, how about this? I'll lighten the mood a little bit, because as to answer Timo's questions about what the filming and the ships and such, the ship was actually in a harbor in San Francisco. That's where they shot some of the ship stuff. The ship was called the Ellen, which is ironic for a film about a captain abusing their crew.
Oh.
I've got actually a few more pieces of trivia if I was just want to go through a few more.
All right.
I think the most interesting thing about this movie that Tanner and I learned from another YouTube video. I might link it in the description. But
Oh, yes!
is that this movie did something very, very important for the Oscars. Is this movie had 1, 2, 3 actors from it nominated for Best Actor.
Whoa.
From one movie. And they were like, wait, hold on. All these guys are great. We want to give them recognition. We can't do this again. That's way too much from one movie in one category. So the next year, they created the Best Supporting Actor category.
Yes,
to
of course.
remedy that. This movie directly created a category, which is fascinating.
Yes. Tucker, if I may, I'm going to spin that off to talk about the win and noms, I should say, because it only won Best Picture, but it was nominated for Best Actor, Clark Gable, Best Actor, Charles Lawton, and Best Actor, Franchot Tonnet. Is that how you say it? Some French guy.
Franchot Tonnet.
Best Director for Frank Lloyd, Best Screenplay, Best Film Editing, and Best Score.
All perfectly well deserved, in my opinion.
Did it get snubbed for cinematography, or it's just not a category yet?
I don't know if that was a category or not. Oh, because there was like black and white. There was black and white cinematography. It just didn't get the nom.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
I think we're gonna have to go back in time and fix that one.
Yeah. The Quest time machine will
on our quest back in time, we'll remedy that, and we'll teach Clark Gable not to be homophobic.
Yeah, we'll go fight Clark Gable and then fix the Oscars.
Yeah. Oh, I have one more thing. Charles Lawton, who played William Bligh, obviously this great sailor, was actually terribly not a very seafaring fellow and was seasick for most of the production.
Ooh,
poor guy.
Not fun.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
I do have a couple little funny things. What the heck is a breadfruit? This is a major plot.
That's an actual thing.
I know
where
it's
bread comes
real.
from.
The bread goes on trees.
Yeah.
No, well, breadfruit are just like these big, sort of lumpy fruits that are just full of carbs, so it's like really filling, which is why they wanted to bring back 1,000 of those trees to feed that to slaves, so they could power their slaves with breadfruit. But that is an actual thing.
Okay, yeah, I knew it was. I just
make that
didn't.
up.
Yeah, I figured it was real. I just was like, oh, okay. And then
I don't know exactly the details of this, but the historical accuracy of this, because based on a true story, is very questionable. I don't know the differences, but it's like really rocky in terms of what's made up for the plot. And at this point, especially because it's a story we're not familiar with, and it's a story that happened a very long time ago, I don't give a shit. This is basically made up. Like, this is basically a fictional story in my mind. So the historical accuracy of it just does not impact my opinion on it whatsoever.
All history is made up. We made it up when we did it.
oh, nice one. And then my other thing was that, Tugger, you talked about how the film is funny. One of the funniest bits in the movie was the map. The map where they're just like scribbling all over it and they're like going all over the place and they're totally not on the right path to go. Yeah. And it's,
When they bounce between all those islands. Oh, Dr. Bacchus's thing about how he changes the story of how he lost his leg every time.
So
That's
funny.
funny.
oh, that was
That's
really
funny.
fun. Yeah, every time you're like, okay, doctor.
The sailors like pranking each other. Oh, that was so good. I mean, it brings out so much charm of these characters.
Like the thing when they're watching the lamp go back and forth and they all get
they
sick.
keep getting sick. Oh, it's so funny.
Like,
This
even
movie
the guy-
it's surprisingly funny.
Yeah, even the people, I think it was Byam who like initiated the prank. He looks at it and he also gets sick. And then Clark Gable's like, these greenhorn sailors, and he looks at it and he starts going like, I gotta get out of here.
So funny.
Yeah, it's all part of the way that the film just shuttles you along at a clipper's pace to just through all this comedy and through all this tension, all the way to the end, basically, or at least all the way to the end, I'd say.
Remember when that guy gets hit by a slab of shark?
Yeah.
I think what really punctuates all this though is that the tone is great in all of its different regards. It's got great comedy. It's got great moments of high octane action, tension, seafaring goodness, and it has great tension between the characters, great dramatic moments, like you said, with Bacchus dying, and then you get something punctuated at the end, which is the real culmination, is Byam's speech in the trial, which I think is fantastically acted. It really brings out the conflict between all the characters and the themes about controlling and what the lies were told to the government to get all this to happen, and I thought that was a great way to cap it off, and to give a good character moment to someone who I thought on the whole was relatively weak, especially compared to Clark Gable and Charles Lawton. Byam had that moment at the end where he was the one on trial, and I really loved that speech.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like Aaron Sorkin had traveled back through time to write that, for better and worse. I don't know. When he just flips, he's like, I'm about to die, so let me just let the writer do whatever the hell he wants here. It was a little bit corny, but I did, once you get going, and it was pretty good. Again, it's an example of really good performances elevating kind of hokey material.
Yeah, I mean it's a movie from 1935. I think you're right. The performances in this film, we haven't talked about them super explicitly. They are very, very good. Clark Gable really does do a lot of acting, carrying throughout the film. And you were talking about it, Tucker, with the just kind of understanding the tension between these characters, is stuff that's left unsaid. Yeah. Little side note, I mean, it's movies. They say they're from Britain. They wear British clothes, and we're like, okay, they're British. They did not speak with accents. They did
Clark
not.
Gable just did not.
They did not try to do British. None of them did. Like, nobody did. But whatever.
It had an accent.
He is British, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
most. Yeah.
Good on him.
No, but that
we'll
is
blame it on my
usually
tone
does.
deafness. My tone deafness. How about that?
I did end up thinking about that. I'm like, okay, wait, they are British, but Clark Gable's just Clark Gable right now. Like he's putting no effort into changing his voice. But at a certain point, you're right. It's like, it is a movie, and I don't really care that they're British. I mean, they are so separated from the British rule, which I think is really interesting in terms of them having their own seafaring culture and talking about how the ways that they punish people and rules of the ship. All that is so separated that it doesn't even really matter that they're British. They're 1700s sailing fellas. It's a whole separate world out there, barred from all the rules of normal civilization. But so it does sort of create this otherworldly, like, does it even matter which country they're from? The accents, everyone just match. They're all just sailors.
Yeah.
It's a separate world.
And they say
Tucker,
mate, and it's great.
I agree and I disagree, and I'll use this for my closing thoughts as well, because something I didn't mention about Bly's character is that he really only mistreats and has this internal hatred for these people that he views as disorderly, the convicts, the common people who are drafted essentially to come aboard this ship. Those are the people that he has this disdain for, these lower members of society who don't have that British honor as a soldier that he views that he has. And I think that just like is another thread that ties very nicely into the core of Mutiny on the Bounty, which is about, self-respect and freedom from a tyrannical system represented by Bly. And you get Clark Gable in here as Fletcher Christian, and he is the moral compass, as Abram said, but it's a hero's journey. He's essentially like, maybe he's less conflicted, or he's less of morally gray as Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but he serves essentially the same purpose. He leads these people out of this tyrannical system. And it's a hero's journey against this regime, essentially. And while it has the pacing issues, while it hits a bit of a wall at some points, I think the filmmaking fundamentals are there. I think the tension is there. I think the humor is there to keep you engaged throughout the story. And I think at the core, the thematic stuff is absolutely there.
I don't know if I may be more a little bit on Abram's side about the thematic stuff. I'm not super bothered by it because I'm entertained, and so I'm just kind of like, riding the waves of the film to just come to I'm enjoying watching the movie, and the fact that it's not like super thought provoking as like a regular movie is fine. As a Best Picture winner, we kind of want probably a little bit more out of it making me think, and my slight confusion towards the end doesn't really help that. But just like out of pure enjoyment, doesn't bother me too much, and we'll probably knock it down a little bit in terms of our ranking, because we have films that do both on this list.
Yeah, sure.
Is it number time?
I think
number time?
I think it's number time. Let's do it.
Oh, it feels like a long time since it was number time. But it's number time.
It's number time. My number.
I've got mine loaded
Typed up and ready.
Typed up and ready?
Mine's ready.
Boom.
Hit
that enter button.
Wow. Okay.
All right.
We got some close ones. We got some dips. We have
an
interesting
a
number.
big dip.
A little
Yeah,
bit of a big dip.
Look at him up there. Look at that big dip.
Look at that big dip over there.
Okay, well, the number that you've been waiting for, the average score of Mutiny on the Bounty is a 7.9. Actually a 7.85, but 7.9. And so the point breakdown, I put it at the lowest with a 6.4, and then Abram put a 7.8, and Tucker and Tanner tied with a 8.6 each. So there you go.
Abram, you're pretty happy with this number rating here.
Yeah, I guess it works out. Is there any ties, or does it fit nicely in the
Yes.
list?
So we have not only a tie in one decimal place, but we the 7.85, 7.9 is a double tie with French Connection. So
Oh my God.
what do we
Okay.
think about this film versus French Connection? We haven't had to do this in a little while.
I know. Speaking of a time gap, it's been a long time since we watched The French Connection.
Yeah.
So
Why don't I take this first, if I can?
Sure. Go for it, Abram.
If you'd oblige me. I think French Connection above this movie any day of the week. I think one of my cardinal quest sins was not ranking French Connection high enough the first time around, and I think I probably fixed
Interesting.
that when we did our official re-rank. But when I think about this film, and I think Timo and I probably have similar thoughts, I think this is a very good film from a lot of perspectives. But what holds it back for me from being great is what I feel is underwhelming characterization and muddled thematic material. Tanner, I see where a lot of your points are coming from, but I think that we're missing some of the components and some of the closure I would have wanted for the thematic statements to be more than just kind of thematic concepts in my mind.
Okay.
And I think that there is such a precision to French Connection. I think that there are really memorable characters and ideas there. And for me, that puts it above this, even though I really believe that this is a very entertaining film. I think on entertainment value, this is really something special. But I look at French Connection. You think about chasing the subway when it's above you and you're riding into police, all this stuff, right? That is I think that same entertainment value, but backed with a little bit more substance. Because something that Timo mentioned, and I don't think I said enough of, is that this movie is very predictable. I really don't necessarily think you're watching it for the plot, right? I do think that a lot of this is carried by spectacle, and I think there's a little bit more weight behind something like a French Connection.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty much those thoughts exactly. I would recommend this film, Mutiny on the Bounty, as like a fun watch to anybody, especially to someone who's maybe not super into older films. I'd be like, I think this would be a pretty good one to get into.
Yes.
Because it doesn't feel very old moment to moment. But I think French Connection as like a Best Picture winner, they're extremely different movies. This is a tough job that we have given ourselves here, but French Connection does just eke out over Mutiny on the Bounty with a little bit more in thematic material, and French Connection I think is visually more stylistic. It takes more risks probably in how it goes throughout the story, and it twists and turns in ways that the first time you don't expect it to. Whereas Mutiny on the Bounty, while I was not really watching it for the plot because I could tell it was happening. That in and of itself is maybe a bit of an issue on a Best Picture winner.
I think for me, I personally am going to put it above French Connection, and this leaves Tanner to really be the deciding factor, which is why I jumped on talking before he did. But I think Mutiny on the Bounty does do its entertainment value and filmmaking and all of that more engaging in my eyes. This movie is a 30s movie, but it feels super fresh today. I mean, you don't feel its datedness almost at all, except for in those few moments, and knowing a little bit about the production, there's a few elements there, but the editing feels snappy in those sequences, like an Edgar Wright movie. It feels exactly like that. It's got the production value and the scale and the scope and the people clambering everywhere that you expect out of something from the 60s, but there's 30 years before. It's so impressive from that angle, and it has really memorable performances. I think there's a lot more to the characters than some of you letting on, and I also don't think it's as predictable as you guys are saying. I mean, I honestly thought that it would be conflict, mutiny, a little bit afterward as they split ways. But it keeps going. It introduces the trial. It introduces following Bly with his people on the boat, and that whole sequence, which I think is really interesting, and continuing these stories on to a way that I think is just really, really compelling. It's really not as predictable as I completely disagree about its predictability, to be honest, but if it does fall into those few tropes and it is a little bit long in the tooth, I think that's just because they had so much they wanted to tell, and they crammed so much in here that it feels a little bit bloated, but all of it's so interesting to me, and I remained absolutely riveted for 2 hours and 15 minutes for this movie, which is pretty long, but I enjoyed almost every moment of it.
Okay, Tanner, those excellent points, Tucker. Excellent points. Abram, you want to say something?
One thing I would like to say, not to respond to Tucker, but Tanner's in an interesting position because Tucker said he's gonna be the one that breaks the vote, but either he's gonna make a deadlock or he's gonna make a majority.
Exactly.
So I propose something, and you can cut this out of the video if need be, if we don't want to open this can of worms on camera. This is more of a planning idea. But if, let's say, Tanner, because based on the facial acting I'm getting off of one Mr. Dykstra, he might be leaning Mutiny on the Bounty. I think there's a compelling case for the audience to break the tie.
Ooh, I kind of like that.
Okay.
But of course, it's all predicated on him saying what I think he's going to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Mutiny on the Bounty.
Yeah.
But Abram, I very much
commenters,
like to
you were
say-
so close.
Yeah, sorry.
Wait,
But,
no, that is
what?
deadlock.
But they do
Wait.
break the tie.
Oh, they
They're
do
going
break the tie. I
Mutiny-
misunderstood.
Mutiny-
I'm sorry.
Wait,
That's okay. Mutiny on the Bounty. It's a deadlock tie. Audience, we need your help. We're drafting you onto the boat, the BLB Bounty, right now. We need your help. Let us know in the comments. What do you think? Imagine if we get another deadlock in the comments, but don't. Make sure comment your vote. The French Connection or Mutiny on the Bounty? Which one is better?
Yeah.
John, this is your chance. Dan, this is your chance. A third person, so there's not another even
Phil,
number of
yeah.
people casting
Phil,
votes.
Seth.
Seth, right? Well, we might hold Seth back as like the super majority tiebreaker if need be.
Look, okay.
But this might be a once in a lifetime opportunity for some of you to shape the Quest ranking yourselves.
It's true.
So.
This is true. It's gonna feel weird not having a list ranking at the end of this episode.
A definitive
What is
spot.
its approximate place?
So it is either going to be in place 20. What is it going to be? Either in 23 or 24. So
Yes.
if you think it should go above French Connection, then you put it in 23. If you think it should go below French Connection, in 24. And we will find out. We'll find out next time where this all ends up. It's riveting. You have to stick around. You'll have to watch the next episode, I guess, to really find out what happens.
We gotta know.
You gotta know.
This is awesome.
We're giving
We should
you
do this every time.
a little bit of a cliffhanger. Well, maybe not every time, because I kind of like to know what's happening next. But it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, it's okay.
The audience, we love you guys, and you get to have a little
Thank
fun
you,
this
the
time.
audience.
Yeah.
And so,
But
finally,
there's one
the
thing that
audience
we
gets to
will
have fun.
know what is happening next week.
Yes.
And that's what movie we are going to be watching. So I have that spin wheel. Tanner, you have that oh so sweet rhyme.
I regret that I didn't prepare a sea shanty version of it this time,
Ooh, that would have been great.
Oh well.
but regardless, it's sort of a shanty within itself. It's a wheel shanty.
Yes. Okay, hit me.
I'm
Sailor.
prepared. Wheel, wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital? Is it on real? Wheel, wheel, what is your deal?
Whoa, okay, that
Woo,
number.
look at that.
Single digits, that number is 3.
It's a
Okay,
very,
so-
very new one.
Wait, I think I know which one this is. Am I right?
Well, why don't you guess first? Because it wouldn't make any sense to.
Is it Shape of Water, or am I off by a
No.
year?
Yeah, you're off by 1 year. Because remember that we cut out a few. Like that we've watched a few. So
Yeah,
it's
we've
not-
watched a few of these.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. I
So
fucked
so
up
that
completely.
doesn't completely go back, but you're very close. In fact, 1 year off. We are on the 2016 Best Picture winner, directed by Barry Jenkins, starring Trevante Rhodes, Andre Holland, and Mahershala Ali somewhere in there. We're watching Moonlight next week.
Whoa,
I've never seen
okay. You've never seen Moonlight.
I've had
No.
to continually put this movie off because I know we were gonna watch it for Quest, so I'm glad that we're doing it now and not later on down the road. Because this is a highly acclaimed film that I was
This is
very
a-
much wanting to watch.
This is a very highly acclaimed film.
For 45 seconds, I was allowed to
True.
say that one of my top 5 films of all time won the Oscars that year. But alas, clerical errors made La La Land, Damien Chazelle's masterpiece, disappear. But maybe it's going to come up on the show at some point.
Maybe,
Who's
maybe.
to say?
Well, I'm quite looking forward to Moonlight. This is a really, really good movie. Not to set your expectations too high, but I hope I am super interested in figuring out and hearing what you guys have to think about it, because it's very different. I think it's quite a different style, and you know, I don't think I'm gonna say anything more about it. Barry Jenkins is quite a prolific director. Has made some good stuff outside of Moonlight, and so we will find out really what the whole verdict is on this film. And man, I can't wait to rewatch it. I love watching this movie. So there we go. Let's do it. We will see you guys next time. Make sure to vote on which film you think is better, French Connection or Mutiny on the Bounty. Not which film you think is better, which film you think is a better Best Picture winner, because the quest for the bestest is about Best Picture winners and not movies at large. We're really trying to figure out which one is the very best, and your vote is needed. I need you.
Or however you want to do it.
You know,
Timo will never know.
I will never know. You could say whatever. Do what you want. You're gonna anyway. And with that, I bid you farewell. Goodbye, sailors. Happy seas. And we'll catch you guys next week. Peace.
Timo, you didn't react to my 20-year-old Dooner.
Dooner.
I'm gonna Dune.
Yeah, y'all better tune into the Soundheiser Funk, man. The Soundheiser Funk starts next week.
I will.
Starts
I
next
actually
week.
will.
And you know what the hilarious part is? It's live and there is a phone number. And when you call the phone number, it will reach me live and in the booth.
We did that.
Get your bits straight, Tucker.
Get your bits straight. You got to have your bits right, dude.
All right, let me readjust them.